My name is Justin, and I am a son of God and an addict, and the host of the RECO12 speaker meeting. And thanks to my God, the steps, and the fellowship of other addicts, I'm living in the relative happy, joyous, and free that is promised to those living in recovery, and have been very active in the rooms of recovery since September of 2013. Welcome to the 114th meeting of RECO12. RECO12 is an organization with the mission of learning and sharing the similarities of addiction of all kinds and gaining and sharing tools and hope from others who are trudging this road. We are an open meeting for all, no matter your life experience and background. To learn more about RECO12, please go to www.reco12.com. That's RECO12.com to learn more about us. RECO12 is a self-supporting service, and we appreciate your help in keeping us working our 12th step in this manner. I'll put the information and links in the chat for those of you who would like to donate, and also they'll be in the show notes of the podcast if you wish to contribute to this cause. We look forward to each week to receiving from the light reflected by our speakers from their higher power. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now let's introduce today's guest speaker, Deb in West Virginia. Her chosen topic is intimacy with self, others, and higher power. And here's a little bit about her, written in her own words. She says, in 2012, I went online to research fellowships that start with the letter S in order to help someone else, and found a pamphlet that is now called Intimacy Avoidance, another aspect of sex addiction, which I will include in the show notes of the podcast. Identifying with several characteristics from the list of symptoms in that pamphlet, I began attending SAA meetings with the focus of intimacy and sexual avoidance. Powerful changes in my life have occurred as a result. I am discovering what intimacy truly means and what it feels like, and I enjoy helping others on that same journey. Deb, we're excited to hear from you. Take it away. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and share some of my experiences. My name is Deb in West Virginia. That is my name. That's what people know me as. I'm not from West Virginia, but I'm currently in West Virginia, so that is my name. 10 years ago, I started a recovery journey that has really shifted a lot of things for me. I'm going to kind of paint a picture of what things were like for me at that time. I was afraid of a lot of things. There was a lot of fear running my life. My main area of recovery was not in my awareness at that time. So I started looking at issues with food, with money, with I qualify for at least, I stopped counting at 7 fellowships that I qualify for. So, I'm cross-addicted with all kinds of things. But all of that was trying to help me have a sense of power and control, because I was afraid to live in my life. I was almost constantly in fantasy. A lot of times it was sexual fantasy, but not all the time. Books, TV, novels, magazines, movies, just anything fictitious so that I could become involved with the lives of the characters and experience emotions within that safety and control of they're not actual people in my lives, I was also, when I started this journey, I had been married for 17 and a half years and had 4 children, but I wasn't emotionally present during a lot of their growing up years, because I couldn't cope with being in reality. My parents weren't able to teach me how to cope with difficult emotions. So I learned not to have them. I learned to stuff them, deny them, repress them, suppress them, medicate them, anything to not feel fear, anger, confusion, shame, sadness, anything that was uncomfortable, anything that was unacceptable besides happiness and love, I did not know how to cope with. So, of course, having children brings up all kinds of interesting feelings that I didn't know how to cope with. So I just mentally escaped into fantasy. And that had an impact, of course, on my marriage and my relationship with my children. When I discovered this pamphlet, there were some things that really stood out to me. I'm going to share my screen here and read a little bit from this pamphlet. There are 18 symptoms, which I won't read all of them, but I'm going to read the definition of intimacy avoidance so that it can be better understood what I discovered and what I started recovering from. So the first part of this pamphlet talks about sexual acting out. Behaviors like promiscuity, infidelity, compulsive masturbation, prostitution, sexual assault, molestation, exhibitionism. These are readily identifiable and obvious behaviors, but the less obvious forms of sex addiction are referred to as intimacy avoidance. It refers to conduct and attitudes that serve to avoid or block sexual, emotional, or spiritual connection with others, ourselves, or a higher power. So there's a lot there. I'm going to break that down in a couple of minutes, but the list of symptoms includes practicing avoidance of sexual thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And the very next symptom is obsessive sexual thoughts about having sex and or avoiding it. So that covers a lot. And I did both. I experienced this part of my addiction as kind of like a bulimia, being obsessed with sexuality, usually other people's sexuality, and also not able to express myself sexually with my loving, committed partner. So that made zero sense to me. I didn't know why. In my mind, I always wanted to be thinking about sex, and I thought I wanted to do it, but then when it actually came time to do it, I couldn't. And part of it was the next symptom, a feeling that our sexuality is inherently bad and something we should feel ashamed of and guilty about. Symptom 7, extreme fear of combining emotional intimacy with sexuality and only being sexual in non-intimate situations. Symptom 12. I'm going to stop that share. So what I learned was intimacy and sex mean two different things, which I did not know. I thought intimacy meant sex. So then I started having to look for conduct and attitudes that serve to avoid or block connection, intimacy, closeness with myself, with others, and higher power. What does that look like? Well, sometimes when I would be watching a movie and I'd start to feel emotional and I'd start to feel moved or touched, I would stifle those tears. I'd distract myself. I'd make a joke. I would turn the channel and turn it off. Something to not have to connect with those feelings and really be intimate with what was coming up for me. That was what fantasy and just fantasy in general did for me as well, is disconnect me from what my thoughts and feelings and needs were. I learned in recovery that I wasn't able to identify my needs and ask for help in getting them met. I was just focused on helping other people identify their needs and get those needs met as a good wife and mother. But it delved into codependency because I wasn't able to even recognize that I had needs, much less explore what that might be or ask for help in getting those needs met. Another way that I had conduct or attitudes that either helped me avoid or block. So avoid for me meant not have to feel it in the first place. So going to bed at a separate time as my partner to avoid possibly maybe having an opportunity to be sexual, avoiding social situations so that I didn't have to talk about myself or be seen or connect with groups of people, or only socializing in groups so I didn't have to have one-on-one conversations with anybody. Those are symptoms from the list as well. I relate to all 18 of the symptoms, but it took me 5 years to realize that. So anyway, those are ways to avoid potentially having to experience closeness or connection with myself or with other people. Blocking would be an example, like I mentioned, with if something started to happen, I would stop it from happening, like with the movie. Or if my partner and I were kind of becoming affectionate and there was a vibe there and things looked like they were going to move forward, I would start talking about the groceries or the children or just talking compulsively, anything to kill that moment, because I just really had a hard time being lovingly sexual. Now, I could be sexual. I have 4 children. But it was related to fantasy. It was all about trying to make something happen. It was about intensity. It was about getting high. It was about mitigating emotions. It was about having power or control or trying not to lose my partner or, any number of unhealthy things that were not good for me. So what I learned in recovery is to express myself by using my sexuality to express what? If sexuality is an expression, it's sending a message. What message do I want to send? I don't like the messages I was sending prior to recovery. Now I use my sexuality to express appreciation, affection, faith. My sexuality has been intertwined with my spirituality. It's an expression of spirituality. I never even thought that was possible. Before recovery, the higher power of my understanding, whom I call God, and sex were never in the same sentence, definitely not in the same room. And now I know that I cannot have healthier sexual experiences without inviting the God of my understanding into those experiences and asking for help in being present, in being able to give and receive loving affection, in knowing where to speak my needs, set boundaries, knowing how to ask for help or ask for what I need. When I first started being present during sexual experiences, I started having emotional flashbacks. So those who might be familiar with the concept of a flashback might think of a war veteran who hears a loud noise and immediately hits the floor thinking that they're under fire. An emotional flashback doesn't have images or memories associated with it often. It's more like the emotions of a stressful or traumatic experience from the past without any context with which to understand it. And when this started happening to me, things would be going well. I'd be connecting with my partner, would be loving, I'd be present. And then all of a sudden I'd be shaking and crying. And I was like, what the heck? That doesn't make any sense because nothing going on right now is unsafe. So, and as I started exploring and learning about that, I started to realize that a lot of my reactions were emotional flashbacks. Something would happen in my life and I would react in a much stronger, over-the-top way that didn't correspond with, like, for example, somebody would say something to tick me off, which, having children, that happens. But the way I would respond is as if I were in threat mode, fight or flight, and that cues me that there's something else going on besides just, what I would work a resentment inventory on. And this is how I figured this out. Well, I didn't figure it out. This is how I was shown this. I need to say here that I have not had very successful experiences with therapists. Everything that I have experienced in recovery, both from addictions and from trauma, has been through 12 steps and just interacting with members of my recovery fellowships, primarily my primary fellowship. So as I started to add questions to my 4th step inventory and look at, okay, is this resentment something, is there a need that's not being met now? Is there something from the past that's being brought forward that needs to be examined and healed? Is there something else going on that I'm not aware of? It was super helpful to kind of break it down. And I discovered that it was really important that I own and grieve things that didn't happen in the past. And once I could say, yeah, this happened, it damaged me. Of course, I'm upset about it. Then I could look at my part. How am I holding on to that resentment? And how is that hurting myself and others? How am I contributing to this situation? What fears are running the show here and causing these impulses to do behaviors that are harming myself and others? What distortions of truth am I experiencing? What lies am I telling myself or believing other people that are making it hard for me to discern the truth of this current situation and of the past? And this all helped me get to know myself more. This helped increase my intimacy with myself. Once I could figure out why, like, for example, I have my number one fear, or my number one button that gets pushed, is not being believed, understood, heard, anything to do with that. There's it shows up in different ways. But so if my kid argues with me, or if my spouse has a different opinion than I do, sometimes before I really started recognizing it and working on it, my reaction would be very strong, because I was feeling threatened. Because being believed is extremely important to somebody experiencing trauma when they're little. And if a person is not believed, then they, especially if they're very young and they depend on their adults, the adults that surround them to care for them and protect them, then it does create this fight or flight response. So, that's still part of my nervous system, and it still sometimes gets activated in me. But now that I know that about myself, when it happens, I'm not surprised, and I can deal with the little kid feelings and calm myself down, connect with my higher power, and be able to respond like an adult in situations rather than react like a threatened child. So the inventory was really very important for me to break this process down and understand what was going on, so that I know how to deal with it. And the more I catch it and the more I deal with it, the less easily I am triggered by those kinds of situations. Will you give me a 1-minute warning when I'm nearing the end of my time? Thank you.
Absolutely.
I just realized I'm not, my timer's not on. And I can go on. I got lots to say.
You still have 10 to 12 minutes. So you're
okay,
good.
Awesome. Thank you. So that's one example of developing intimacy with myself. And as I mentioned, I needed to develop intimacy with my higher power. And at first, when I first worked the steps with a sponsor, I thought step 2, which is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I thought that was going to be a breeze, because I grew up in a religious family and I had a belief in a God. And I thought, do I believe in God? Yes. Check that box, move on. And my sponsor said, well, we have to look for what your insanity is. Tell me examples of your insanity. I'm like, okay. So I went through that. And then, we had to delve into, do I believe that a power greater than myself, whom I call God, could restore me to sanity? I was tempted to say, yeah. But then I thought, well, if I believed in God this whole time and have been faithful and a good person, why am I still such a mess? Maybe I don't actually believe that. Let's look into that a little bit more. And my sponsor had me do this exercise, which at first I thought was stupid. I have since changed my mind about it, but it was to create a want ad for a higher power. And I thought, okay, this is not Build-A-Bear, folks. We can't create our own higher power. How much higher would that be? But it was a really helpful exercise, because I got to see, what do I actually believe about the God of my understanding? What do I need from a higher power? And where are the gaps those things that didn't mesh, And I got to look at lies and distortions, and I got to release those fears and lies and distortions so that I could create a different relationship with a higher power. And that was, the set aside prayer is one thing that was helpful. Set aside the things that I think I know and open myself up to new possibilities. And I started to interact with people that have a lot of different faith traditions and backgrounds. I got to experience testing some things out from different perspectives and my understanding and experience with just spirituality, not religious, not religiosity necessarily, but just spirituality, is expanding and deepening. I started exploring things like yoga prayer, how to put an intention into into the world through positioning the body in different ways, and how to meditate in a lot of different ways. Stilling my mind is very frustrating and difficult for me. Monkey mind, big time here. So the whole, clear my mind, it doesn't, right now, that's not what I can do. And that's okay. But a walking meditation I can do. I can pay attention to the feeling of my feet hitting the pavement or the grass or wherever I'm walking. I can be aware of the breeze and the birds. This is intimacy with being present in my body and on the planet, and connecting with plants and animals. I didn't know I had a sensitivity to plants and animals before recovery, but now this place, the room that I'm in, my office, has several live plants that I've managed to keep alive. I mean, I had a black thumb before recovery. I would just kill plants, but I'm discovering that I have a vibe with them. I connect with them. And they feed my soul in a way that I didn't anticipate. Being able to connect with the God of my understanding through nature and the planet has been a different way of going about feeling an energy or a presence or a care or the power of cycles and life. And just learning how to experience being in my place on this world, my one tiny little spot in this world. I'm not better than or less than anybody else, but I am important. I have a place in this web of energy that exists on the planet. And I never felt like I belonged anywhere before recovery. I never felt emotionally safe either, which I didn't even know was missing. I didn't know what that was. But in the rooms of recovery, where people shared really personal things, emotional things, I was able to notice what was missing from my life, because there was a huge contrast. Especially the fellowship that I belong in has a lot of guys in it. And to sit in a room with guys and have them be emotional, they're crying or they're sharing about their feelings, I was like, what the heck? I had not experienced that very regularly before. And it was kind of bizarre. And at first I was like, what does that have to do with recovery from sex addiction? Feelings? Why are we talking about our feelings? We're just supposed to stop doing this, right? No, actually, it was getting in touch with my feelings and sharing those with other safe people, not being judged and not being, what's the word? There's a distracting noise outside my door. Sorry. Having a lot of questions asked where they don't believe me. Well, okay, there, I guess. Or other things that created emotional unsafety. Not having those experiences in the rooms of recovery, but having the acceptance and the care and the people saying me too, the recognition. It just really changed something for me, being able to connect with others on a deeper level. And I started realizing that my friendships, even though I've had friends throughout my life, they were all very surface level. Could I tell them really personal, deep, emotional things? No, we talked about what was on TV or what we were buying, or complain about other people or whatever. But no, I couldn't share. I wasn't in touch with myself enough to have anything to share anyway. So I really started learning to connect with myself and to connect with others, because when I got to know myself better, other people had something to connect with. So I can't say that there was a definite order in things, the connection with self, connection with other people, connection with a higher power or sources of higher power, because people in the fellowships and the planet, energy of past ancestors and stuff, they're all sources of higher power and guidance and strength for me. I call them, my celestial GPS, my sources of guidance, strength and power, or no, power and strength there, GPS. It's broadening and expanding in recovery. So I believe that God is behind all of it and is working through all of these avenues. But I'm grateful that during the times when I don't feel like I can connect directly with God, because there are some times when my spiritual fitness or my emotional state makes it more difficult to connect directly with God, I can call a friend in the fellowship, or I can journal, or I can walk in nature. There's been times when I have connected with music, or music has helped me connect with myself, my emotions, and my higher power. Sometimes I have a playlist of battle songs. There's songs that help me feel courageous when I feel like I'm needing to fight a spiritual battle, and when I'm really struggling with something, I have played a song and sung out loud with it in sort of a shouting way. Just trying to work through the emotions and be present to them, not dismiss them or numb them or analyze them, because one of my favorite things to do is get up in my head, analyze those feelings, but to allow them to pass through and to really capture the power of being able to be supported and connected and allow for that. So some of us call intimacy avoidance, some of us call sexual avoidance sexual anorexia. It just kind of depends on who you talk to and what fellowship you're in. There's different fellowships that have that term, and it gets stressed more or less according to whatever groups. Thank you. So for me, I am recovering from sexual anorexia, and I'm so blessed that I don't feel that shutdown like I used to anymore. I don't feel like I'm stepping on the gas pedal and the brake at the same time, where my head is filled with sexual stuff, but I can't connect with my partner that way. That's healing. And also, I see people as human beings. I don't objectify myself or others anymore. I'm grateful that those areas are recovering. I also am grateful that I'm not as anorexic or self-starving from connection with other people emotionally. I've experienced emotional anorexia. I've experienced spiritual anorexia, where I just, my prayers were sort of like a list of demands, and there weren't any sort of connection at all. There was no two-way about it. So I'm just experiencing lots and lots of different ways to connect and healing from all of the ways that I was disconnected, and I'm still on the journey. Lots of recovery yet to go, and I'm grateful because it's working, and I like I like who I'm becoming, and the passion that I have about the kinds of things that I'm really interested in, and helping other people recover from this too. And so I'm just going to keep on the path. And I think I'm good to pause there.
Stress and trauma happen inside of the body, which means we can heal them through the body. My name is Luis Mojica. I'm a somatic therapist, nutritionist, and host of the Holistic Life Navigation podcast. Join me each week as I teach you how to release stress and trauma through listening to your body, using nutrition, somatic experiencing, and other holistic practices. You can listen at the Holistic Life Navigation podcast or at holisticlifenavigation.com.
Awesome, Deb. Thank you so much for sharing that experience, strength, and hope with us. I've got a page full of notes and questions for you. But I want to remind our live audience here to ask Deb any questions. Please type them into the Q&A link at the bottom of your screen. Looks like two speech bubbles over the top of each other if you're on a computer. And I honestly don't know what it looks like on a phone. I'll have to check that out so next time I can share that. Yeah, thank you so much for your share. You mentioned earlier that you have qualified for at least 7 different fellowships, but it sounds like you've settled down into a primary one. Tell me a little bit about, just real quick, about the process of settling that down into your primary and how that primary fellowship helps you. You've talked a little bit about that, but let's dig a little bit deeper there if you don't mind.
Sure. I started with recovery in an all-purpose faith-based 12-step program that kind of covers all of the bases, and that was helpful for an introduction. At that time, I was not identifying as a sex addict or anything to do with sexual issues. So it was helpful for me to say, oh, okay, there's food issues, there's money issues, etc. But then when I went online to research as fellowships, I identified with the list of characteristics and thought, oh my goodness, new avenue. And when I started to connect with people in SAA, that really quickly became my main focus. I could see how intimacy avoidance, it wasn't just sexual avoidance for me, it was intimacy avoidance, and how that was actually at the base of my food issues and my money issues and all of the other, the codependency issues and all of the other stuff. So grateful I didn't have to join 7 different fellowships. For me, focusing on this really changed a lot for me in all of the areas of my life.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Deb. I really appreciate it. All right, our first question from our live audience comes from an anonymous attendee. They say, hey, Deb, thank you for being vulnerable and for sharing. What a great example of hope. You talked about how at one point in your life, connection with yourself, others, and God just wasn't there. But now you do have that connection. My question is, how did that happen? Was there one particular event that happened that brought about the change? Or if it was a slow process, what was it that provoked your initial desire to change the course of your life?
Wow, that's a great question. No, it wasn't one event. It was over time. I did come in contact with a book that has been helpful for me. It's called Sexual Anorexia, Overcoming Sexual Self-Hatred by Patrick Carnes. And he takes the 12 steps and pairs them with 12 dimensions of healthier sexuality. Well, the first part of the book talks about, how sex addiction, what is its relationship to sexual anorexia? There were 2 sides of the same coin in his mind. And I agree, that's been in my experience. What kind of families do, blah, 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 at the first part of the book. But the second part of the book talks about the dimensions of healthier sexuality. And the first 2, the ones that correlate with step 1 and 2, were super helpful for me. Step 1, first, admitted that we're powerless over fill in the blank and that our lives have become unmanageable. He pairs with nurturing, which at first made 0 sense to me. It's like comparing apples and houses. What does nurturing have to do with admitting that we're powerless over something? But he points out that we can admit that we're powerless all we want, but unless we receive support and help and nurture and care, admitting something doesn't do me any good. So I needed to learn how to receive nurture. I needed how to nurture myself. I needed how to learn how to treat myself with gentleness and respect, because that way I could ask for that from other people. I could understand what nurture felt like. Sex is supposed to be nurturing. I did not know that. That was a shocker for me. But learning how to nurture myself and learning what nurture felt like and being able to give and receive nurture was really crucial to my recovery. And then the principle that it connects with step 2 is sensuality of the senses, which when I'm in fantasy, I'm disconnected from my body, from my senses, all of the input that our senses bring in on a regular basis. So I started doing nurturing exercises regularly and sensory awareness exercises regularly. to start noting and paying attention and sharing with other people things that I was seeing or hearing or touching or tasting or smelling. And just starting to tune into that tuned me into my higher power in a very different way. At first I thought, this is dumb, I can't like smell God. Or whatever. But I learned that by being able to have the experience of smelling some hand lotion, for example, or something delicious cooking in the oven, I was able to experience gratitude and appreciation and pleasure. And those things weren't scary to me like they were in a sexual situation at the beginning of recovery. So that helped move me towards connecting with myself and connecting with my higher power. And little by little, my spiritual awakening was very much like not being in a cloud anymore, having my feet firmly on the ground and feeling the weight of gravity on my body, being able to interact with the world in a safe way. And I had to learn how to set boundaries. That was the third thing that was really important, is learning how to say, that's not okay with me. I'd prefer if you treat me this way. If you don't, here's what I'm going to need to do. And being able to treat myself with respect and request that others do as well, and have consequences if they don't. And I couldn't do that before. So those were three things that were really helpful in connecting with self, others, and higher power.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. That gives me additional thoughts to mull over here. One thing that you brought up during your share, Deb, is that you talked about trauma or harms that had happened in youth and the process and being able to own and grieve those things in order to move forward. What does that look like to you? And do you have any maybe specific examples that you're willing to share with us in that process?
Sure. When I started recovery, I did not think I had any trauma, because I heard people having these major, what I call big T trauma experiences that are just obviously, life changing. And I had one that I could think of, which included inappropriate sexual behavior when I was little with an adult. And that did change the course of my life, and definitely caused the need to be heard and believed and understood. There were other things that happened with men, particularly that kind of reinforced and enhanced my fear and hatred of men. And that really persisted in my life until recovery, when I got to hear the men being emotional and see them as human beings, and shifted a lot in me when I related to the kinds of emotions and experiences that they were sharing. So let me backtrack here. I took myself on a rabbit trail. Remind me of the question again, please.
Yeah. So owning and grieving those things that did or did not happen. And then how does that look like to you, that process of owning that and healing from that?
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Yes. So that was the subject, I guess, of the quote big T trauma, and that was the extent of it. The rest of the stuff that I've discovered over the years that were what some would call little T trauma are things that like emotional misalignment, like the lack of attunement, not feeling emotionally connected with the people that I was surrounded with as I was growing up. And I wasn't aware of it at the time. I didn't really feel like there was anything different or missing or anything until I got in the rooms of recovery and could experience something different. And then by comparison, realized that wasn't there. And that was a source of grief. It still is, to know that that's had an impact. And not that I have great parents. They were what what the trauma recovery books call good enough parents, but we all have challenges and issues, and what they weren't able to do had an impact, just like what I wasn't able to do with my kids has had an impact. And I recognize that, and being able to grieve that, to own that and say, yeah, this was missing, and here's the effects that it had on my life, and it made it difficult or impossible for me to do X, Y, and Z. But now, because of recovery, I'm having corrective experiences. Those connections and needs that weren't met when I was little, I'm learning how to be my own wise, loving inner parent, and really be there for myself and attune with myself. And I'm learning how to attune with other people. Just being able to really be seen and heard and feel safe in doing that has healed a bunch of stuff for me. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you so much, Deb. Kind of building on that a little bit, just recently, like in the last week, maybe a little over a week, I've had a blind spot that I've had my whole life kind of revealed a little bit to me, a new, well, not new blind spot, but I've seen it for the first time really. And it's been painful. I don't like it. And I'm very resistant to shining the light on it anymore. I'm hiding from it. And it definitely affects emotional intimacy with others, which takes the entire circle of all of the intimacies in there. And I'm just resistant to that. How do you own when you own one of those weaknesses, one of those traumas, one of those things that I'm perpetrating, for example? How do you own that and then make that into a strength of sorts?
A higher consumption of vegetables may cut your odds of developing depression by as much as 62%. An American Cancer Society study found that women who sit for more than 6 hours a day have a 40% higher death rate. Hi, my name is Maya Acosta, and I'm a health and wellness educator and host of the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast. Join me and the amazing people that I get to talk to as I set out to learn how to improve our quality of life and increase our longevity. You can listen at the Healthy Lifestyle Solutions podcast or at healthylifestylesolutions.org.
That's a fascinating question. Trying to think of if I have an example of that. What's coming to mind is an amend process. 2 of them. So here's an example of fighting with myself to not really sure I want to feel those emotions or share them. So it's always a good idea for me to check in with myself, and if there's hesitation, to kind of just work with those parts of me that are feeling that hesitation, because if I just shove it aside and bulldoze forward, then I do damage to myself. So this is an example. It's fascinating how higher power works. This is just as it's falling out of my mouth, I'm like, this is not where I was going, but this is actually where I need to go. So there we go. So what I've been learning about is personifying emotions. Instead of I am scared or I am angry or even I am feeling angry, I say a part of me is feeling scared. A part of me is feeling angry. And by using that language and even visualizing those emotions as either younger versions of myself or animals or objects or however they want to show up in my imagination, I'm able to dialogue with those emotions and get more information about myself. So it's using the ability to dissociate to do an inventory, basically, what's going on behind the scenes here? What's driving this? And as I've started learning how to do this, what's called parts work, being able to further understand what's coming up for me and help those parts of me trust me And when I say me or self, capital S self, I'm talking about the connected to God self, the adult that has the ability to respond instead of react. As I do that, then I'm able to tend to the needs of the parts that are feeling fear or anger or whatever it is they're feeling. And then I'm able to respond in a situation as an adult. So there's an amend that I wanted to make with my oldest son, because I realized that I wasn't always there for him. And I've noticed that my inability to be in touch with and express emotions has had an impact. And I don't think at the time when I attempted to have that conversation that he was at a stage where he could really get or understand what I was talking about. But it did help me to feel better, to be able to articulate it and to be aware of it, and continue to make a living amend by inviting sharing that is on a deeper, more emotional level, creating emotional safety. Another thing is coming to my mind. Certain attitudes that I've had that have started to needed to shift, as far as openness to things that I have been taught, or quote, road bad or wrong or unacceptable or whatever, from a religious context. I've had to examine this is hard to put into words. I've had to separate behavior from people, and I've had to really open myself up to what does my higher power want for me and want for the individuals that I'm trying to connect with. And being able to navigate very challenging, murky waters where I don't have answers and things aren't clear. I don't know where I stand on some things. I don't understand some things. There's questions that aren't answered. It gets very complicated. But because I am learning how to follow my gut, deal with whatever comes up emotionally, and help those parts of me calm down, respond to situations as an adult, and connect on an emotional level, the rest of it doesn't matter. It's helpful to just ask for my higher power's help in tuning into what is really important in this situation, and just releasing the rest into the hands of my higher power. And not being about outcomes or not being about the details, just being about people, connecting with people. I don't know if that's helpful.
No, very helpful. In fact, I want to build on that just a little bit with this next question. You talked about your sponsor had you put together a want ad for a new higher power to dispel the lies. How did you put it? The lies, the distortions that you had put on that higher power during your life, in your walk in faith, and your walk in life. As you have done that, and as you have created a new relationship with your higher power, with the God of your current understanding that I'm sure continues to develop, how has that affected your lifelong spiritual faith walk? Has that changed anything in what you've done in your walk in your own faith or religion practice?
Yes. Yes, the short answer is yes. So I'm reminded of a movie, The Little Mermaid, where the seagull comes on and says, "This is this and this is that." Actually, I'm reminded of whoever the character that was quoting, making fun of the seagull. That was me. That was the seagull who thought I knew everything, and the fork is something you comb your hair with. Of course it is. Doesn't everybody know that? And I'm learning that I don't know everything, and that's okay. I think my need for control manifested itself in needing to have all the answers and needing to know things and have a guarantee of things, or which I now know is a bunch of bunk. I'm becoming more comfortable in the blurry, the unknown, the ability to say, I'm not sure about that, and that's going to be okay for right now. All I need to know is, what is my right thing right now? What is my next right thing right now? I don't need to know what happens in the future. That's not my business. I don't need to obsess about and dwell about the past. That's already done. I do business today, and what's right here and right now. That's where intimacy is. That's where intimacy with myself and with God is just, what is the best thing that I can do right now? How can I contribute to this situation in a way that is in alignment with my values and what I want to present, how I want to present myself in the world, and just relax about everything else. And this method has been helpful for me in recovering from fears of all sorts, phobias that I've struggled with for my entire life, are disappearing because of the ability to just relax and trust my gut, trust my higher power. One of the biggest fears that I had was being deceived, and it's not a fear anymore. I just am feeling a lot more safe in just being guided by my gut. And it's okay. I think part of it is I'm okay to make mistakes because they don't mean anything about me. And I have, through the amends process, my higher power very clearly showed me that I don't have the ability to mess up anybody's life beyond what my higher power can heal. So that was a big relief, because I've messed up people's lives, myself included. I've done a lot of messing up, but it's not on me to fix it. That's my higher power's job. And so my job is just to become open to allowing those changes to happen in me and helping facilitate those changes with other people, but releasing the outcome to the hands of the higher power.
Love that. So it sounds like to me, and this is my experience, that that shift, that releasing of control, that me stepping off the throne of God and letting God sit on that throne rather than me, has actually made me a more useful instrument in his work, whether that be in my religion, whether that be in my life, in my family, whatever it may be. Did I sum that up pretty well?
Very well.
Yeah, thank you. All right. I think that we can start wrapping this up. Do you have any other words of wisdom for us, Deb?
Let me see. Yes, fascinatingly, here's an example of reduction of fear and an increase in trust in my higher power. Other times that I've given presentations in the past, I have written out every word, including the conversational, and so, however, written out word for word, and then tried to read with as much personable conversational tone as possible. That is not the case today. My preparation was just praying and meditating a little bit, and asking for things to be brought to my mind that could be helpful to myself and to other people, and trusting that whatever I say is going to be fine. And that's my wisdom, is it works. Trusting the higher power is working for me. And it's not as dire as I thought it was. And it's a lot more freeing than I ever imagined to be in the moment and trusting my gut, because I just have a different perspective on things. I see things differently. And just that spiritual awakening has given me a new lens with which to view myself and others that gives me clarity and guidance and direction and courage and a reduction in fear.
Love it. Thank you so much, Deb. This has been a fantastic RECO12 speaker meeting for recovering addicts and those wanting to learn more about addiction. Now, I just want to extend the invitation to all of us here live and those listening. Come back next week. Listen to the next one. Listen to this one. Apply the principles that you have, that your higher power has poked you in the side and said, hey, check this out. You need to dig a little bit here. There were several of those points here as Deb has shared these things that I need to look at. I invite the audience to consider also joining our private Facebook group. I put the link in the show notes and in the chat of this meeting, and participate in our community. Ask questions, answer others' questions. These are things that we can work together as a community and be, have that emotional openness and open that up in that manner. All right. If you've not yet rated and reviewed the podcast in Apple Podcasts, please go do so now. It's a great way to help us work our step 12 in this by sharing this message with others. Now, once again, I invite you to come back next week. Next week, we'll be hearing from Andrew and Sarah from Poland. They are a married couple. They spoke to us once before in meeting number 83, and their topic before was the sexaholic nuts and bolts of a healthy relationship. And this next week, they will be speaking on how to create something out of nothing, intimacy in our relationship. So I'm excited about hearing about that. I think it's a great building block upon what we've talked about today. And very good. Let's close out this meeting now with a beautiful prayer that Deb shared with me that she got. If you want to share some background on this, Deb, before you say the prayer, that would be amazing. But let's turn that over to you.
Oh, yeah. So a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, the women's intergroup of SAA was deciding to put on a virtual retreat. And we really liked the, I'm trying to look up something at the same time because I just realized I didn't have that handy and I don't have it memorized. The unity prayer from OA, but we wanted one for our fellowship, SAA. So we invented one because that's how things work, right? in fellowships, they're created by members. So this was kind of a collaborative effort by a group of women. And it's right now lovingly titled New Unity Prayer. It's not official anyway, but it is one that several of us like and use. Higher power, we give thanks for this recovery community and for those who paved the way so that we too may find healing. May we find courage to leave our old lives behind and to keep moving forward on the spiritual path. When we feel discouraged and isolated, let us remember that we are all together now, and that side by side, we are building new and fulfilling lives. Together, we can accomplish what was impossible for each of us alone. May serenity be ours today.
Thank you. Everybody, come trudge this happy road with us. Work it. You are worth it.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of light, feet still on the ground. I can still be found. sea.